like to think of every episode of Catholic Sports News as a special one, but this was a little bit extra special today as we have Father Brandon Dang with us, Director of Priesthood Vocations here in the Diocese of Orange. Welcome to the program, first of all. We're glad, I know it's a busy time, a lot going on for you, so we're glad you're able to take some time and talk with us this week.
No, of course, Bob. No, thanks for having me. And this is definitely a busy time, but to be able to reflect and sit back a little bit and just have conversation is great. Right. So thanks for having me.
For those watching, we have this beautiful trophy here. If you're listening to our podcast, take our word for it. This is a really nice trophy with a big gold basketball on top of it.
Made by Tiffany's. No.
It might as well be. I would have believed it. It's real nice. We're going to talk about that Priests versus Seminarians basketball game in just a couple of minutes. But I really want to start by talking with you because I know you're such a big sports fan, and I think oftentimes we think of our priests as just these holy men, and that part is true, right? But to become a priest, but we don't think of you as sometimes as just a regular guy who maybe grew up as a big Laker fan as you did, and sometimes I think maybe we lose sight of that hey, priests just start out as a regular guy, my high school and stuff like that. You got the call from God at some point in your life to enter the religious life. But I would imagine as a kid in high school, growing just a huge basketball fan, a big basketball junkie, and really into sports. Was that kind of the path for you in the beginning?
Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned that because a lot of people, a lot of times, and it's actually natural for people to think that way, that we're always at church, we're praying, which we definitely we do, and that's part of our life, our vocation. But of course, we're human beings, and there's things that we have hobbies, and we have aspects of our life that help us to grow even more in deeper relationship with others, with God, because that kind of reminds us of who we are, right, through our hobbies. And so for me, I grew up with a lot of sports around the home. And I think a lot of that came from my mom, actually. And so I was born and raised I was born in Torrance, California, and then moved down to Aliso Viejo, a little small city down in South Orange County when I was 4. And as we know, Orange County is definitely a huge sports county. Oh, yeah. Everywhere you go, it's like sports. But I remember growing up, my mom, being such a huge sports person herself and just wanting to raise us well, she didn't want us to be one-dimensional. She wanted us to be very well-rounded. And with that being not just doing the school thing or not just doing the music thing. So she signed us up for like everything, And I remember a very young age, about like maybe 5 or 6, she said to me, "Look, Brandon, I want my boys to be well-rounded, so I want you to go into sports. I don't care what sports that you do, just pick one." And so I was like, okay. And I was a little bit reluctant, and because at the time I was at home, I was a little bit sheltered, so home is what I knew. But I got to say, sports really did a great number for me in terms of growing in life and learning life lessons. So my mom signed me up for soccer, at the beginning, and I played soccer. And I remember going back to my mom. I was like, "Man, Mom, this is just too much running." And then she was like, "Okay, on to the next sport." And then she signed me up for baseball. And I remember playing baseball, Little League. I played for a year, and then I was like, "Mom, it's too slow." And nothing against baseball or soccer players, because I think
it just wasn't for you.
It just wasn't for me. Right. And then I think I played football, for a season, and I had fun with that, but I just didn't love it. There was something that connected me to it, even though it was a good balance of the slow and the fast. And then my mom, who grew up a very huge Laker fan, which you kind of know where that comes from, she then signed me up for basketball. And I fell in love. From the moment that I hit the hardwood, I just completely fell in love with the sport. I went to sleep with the basketball. I woke up with the basketball. There was little basketball hoops on every single door, in the house that we could find, because everywhere you go out, you would see me with a basketball. Yeah. And loved it. And I pretty much played organized basketball from when I was about maybe 8 or 9 years old until through high school.
Okay.
I played 2 years in high school, and then I quit after 2 years, but I kept playing it. And it was just something for me that I felt that I was so connected to. And it was also my safe haven. Anytime that I had trouble in school or the home front or anywhere, I felt that I could just go out to the basketball court and leave it all out there. And a lot of my close friends know that I'm a very competitive, individual. So when I go out there, it's all about basketball. So, and it taught me a lot for sure.
It's such a unique sport because there's something very cathartic about it. It's a team sport, but you can also get out there on your own, right? And just start shooting hoops by yourself somewhere. All you need is a ball and a net, right?
Yeah, and actually that reminds me too, like we had this little lifetime basketball hoop, like my dad bought for like $80 or something like that. And it became like, that was the spot. And I remember drawing lines on the driveway, making sure that I didn't, the tape measure, make sure that it's 15 feet. I got to practice my free throws. Right. And I would shoot like, I think 500 shots, a day. Like, I mean, it was at least 500 shots a day. And then free throws, I would, at the very end, because I remember my coach always teaching us, shoot them when you're tired. Because when you're in the basketball game, when you get fouled, when you're at the free throw line, you're going to be tired. So I remember shooting free throws, but I had a certain number that I had to get at. So no matter if it was like 1,000 shots to me to get to that number, I need to make sure to hit that number. So so a lot of it reminds me of that for sure. So
many people we talk to after they've stopped playing, and I really miss that team aspect, right? I really miss just being with the guys out there. Was that true for you too when you stopped playing? Yeah,
and actually it's kind of crazy because I still have some really close friends from the time that I was playing basketball with, and it goes beyond the sport. I mean, you learn so much about camaraderie, about team. And I have to say, that was pretty much where I learned about team, about sacrificing, for your teammates. And I'll never forget the drill that we did too, when we were practicing, where near the end of practice, or actually throughout practice, our coach would just randomly throw a basketball to one of us. And whoever caught it had to shoot 2 free throws. And if you made both, then you wouldn't have to run. If you made one, then you would have to run suicides. Or if you missed both, you would have to run 17s and 17s was the sideline to sideline drill that we had to do. So when you hit one side of the sideline is 1, and then back 2, 3, 4. And that was always the hardest one. Because when we ran the other lines, it was a little bit easier because you go free throw back, half court back, and you can kind of pace yourself. But 17s were brutal. But that really taught us. And then if we missed it wasn't you that ran, it's the whole team. So I remember that drill very vividly. Because one, I remember missing a lot, and then my teammates being like, "Oh my gosh, why'd you miss the shot?" But it really taught us to be together, and that we're not in this alone. That we win together and we fail together. So that was a really wonderful thing I learned playing basketball, amongst many other things.
Yeah, there's so many lessons. Every coach I talk to, right? It's just there's so many great lessons. Athletes go on to make great CEOs, great business people, great husbands and wives. The girls, we don't want to forget the girls' sports too, right? And I imagine they go on to make great priests as well, right? There's not just one. There's no one path to anything in life, and I'm sure the priesthood is the same way. But do you find there are a lot of priests that came out of sports? It's kind of maybe a natural progression for some.
Well, I remember, well, not everyone, but at the same time, when I was in seminary, talking about well-rounded individuals, where you had guys who were in sports, guys who were in even the business world, in law or school. So there's definitely a multifaceted, multi-talented pool that I was just so blessed. Sometimes I felt like, man, I'm the low guy on the totem pole here, just to see so many talented men. And but at the same time, when you speak more specifically about the sport, I remember there was a certain time in the seminary where there was a good amount of guys who were playing basketball or who had swam, who had played football or baseball too. So, and a lot of that I think attributes a lot, and you can totally tell. I think athletes know each other, too, because when you get together, there's this language that you kind of understand, and where it's about the team or where it's about effort and not giving up, those sort of things. And that's not to say you can't learn that in other places, but I think for us athletes, there's an element that you just really understand each other. You don't even need to say it. When you're out there being competitive, you just know. And I remember there was a few guys, we would go up to each other, man, it's great that you know how to play basketball. And not just because you can shoot well or whatever, but you know the fundamentals, team effort, teamwork in it. But
I imagine there are times in the seminary, and then as a priest, where it's can be overwhelming. There are times when you need a little break from it, getting out, and maybe getting up with some of your fellow priests or fellow seminarians. Do you get a chance to shoot hoop or just do something, right, man? I'm sure that's a great outlet as well.
Yeah, I think before COVID, I remember there was a whole young adult group that we would go out together. So it wouldn't just be the young adults or just the priests, but it would be all of us together. And I think there was a great tool of evangelization in that, where a lot of these young adults, because again, they also see many people who are Catholic or going to church, they only see us in the vestments, right? They see us at the altar, they see us praying, they see us preaching and really teaching them to be holy and to love God. Then you see all of a sudden the priest in jerseys and basketball shoes and shorts. It's kind of like, wait, this is a little off kilter here. But it really also lets the guard down a little bit, just so that we can be able to have that conversation. Not to say we don't guard on the court, when we're out there, but I think there's an element of where there can be a great camaraderie that happens. And so, right before COVID, we were doing this once a week, and many of us were doing our day off. And I think that's really the best time that we are able to get together, and not only just to play the sport, but also fraternity. I think for me, it also grows in that sense of knowing that we're not alone in this whole process of priesthood, because only few are chosen in it. And so sometimes you can kind of get into your little island of just the parish or just by yourself, especially as diocesan priest, where religious, you live in communities like the Dominicans, Franciscans. But for us as diocesan, our community is our parish. And a lot of times some parishes just have one priest or two, maybe. We're lucky in our diocese we have two, but I have friends in other dioceses where it's only one priest to like three parishes, So I think we're blessed here, obviously, to have that closeness. But at the same time, that's our place that we can choose as an outlet, but also really to grow in fraternity with one another, to really enhance that whole team element that we can share with each other, not only just the love for sport and being an athlete, but also being a minister and a father to people and a priest itself.
And I want to ask you about maybe the importance of that as well. How important is it to have sort of that humanistic side of priesthood, right? For people to be able to obviously see you as a priest, but see you as I mentioned at the top, as just kind of a regular guy in some ways, right? And maybe for the youth as well to be like, hey, Father's a Laker fan, Father, kind of see that within them as well, right? Hey, I'm a Laker fan too, right? And Father grew up playing basketball, and I played basketball, I would imagine there's a connection that kind of happens as well with your parishioners, and those are important connections to make too on many different levels, and that's one way you can do it.
Yeah, I think there's two things I think of that. One, in scriptures, it says that we're in the world, but not of the world, right? So that means that we're in the world. That doesn't mean that we are completely separated from it, because we're human. We have our bodies, we have our soul, we have who we are, and friendship. And I think the Lord, it really speaks to Jesus's incarnation, where he becomes human, he becomes flesh to be with us. And God, Jesus himself, who is that wonderful example, who is our example as priests, as the eternal high priest in Jesus, it only makes sense, for us to be even more incarnate, to the people. And of course, not to be so enmeshed in it that we lose that sense of the office and the special gift and supernatural gift that the Lord has given us through priesthood. So I think about that. And secondly, it reminds me of my first parish that I was at. I was ordained in 2016 and assigned at a parish in Newport Beach. Had a school there, a pretty big community, and the school was about like 400 plus students, and it was awesome. I mean, I really appreciated just going out there, being with the students, being with the kids, playing basketball with them, and like I was mentioning a little bit earlier, it kind of lets the guard down too. Like when you're talking about the conversation, or even after mass, sometimes I go up to the parents or like to the dads or to moms, and then a lot of times like, what do I speak to a priest about? At least you can be able to break the ice a little bit and just be like, hey, did you see that Laker game yesterday? It was amazing. Or I would like wear my Lakers jacket, around, and it doesn't even need to be said. Like I wear my purple Lakers jacket. Purple is like a pretty like vibrant color, so it's pretty obvious.
It's hard to miss purple, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so to be able to invite people into that is just a great thing. And I also remember coaching the 7th grade basketball team at my first parish. And that was an awesome opportunity. I won't tell you our record, but at the same time, it was just an awesome opportunity to be able to just be with the kids and be with the boys and just to teach them the game of basketball, a game that I love so dearly. And now, obviously, I'm not in the NBA, so I mean, I'm not going to teach them like that level of it, but at least some of the fundamentals and even some life lessons in it. And if I can sprinkle a little faith in that, it's even better.
Yeah, and I think that's the chance to make that connection, obviously, with, as I mentioned, with your parishioners. Okay, so you personally, when did you start to get an inkling that maybe this was a call that I'm starting to, God's maybe kind of talking to me here a little bit?
Sure. I know, they always ask you the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I think for me, at a very young age, I wanted to be a basketball player. And I think after I quit basketball in high school, it was kind of a reality check for me. Obviously, it's like, many recruits, you go through high school, you get recruited by college. So I just knew that, okay. And I'm actually very blessed that I did do that because it actually helped me regain the love for basketball, because I know sometimes, because I remember being an organized ball, it can really almost be work, and it'd be so tedious that you kind of lose that spark, from the beginning of when you fell in love with the sport itself. And so for me personally, it was actually very helpful. So then it kind of gave me a dose of reality, being, okay, now what's the plan for the future, right? And I was actually just going through life as any average Joe, where for me, I wanted to follow my dad's footsteps. He was in the IT world. And so I decided to go to Irvine Valley College and pursue that career of being anywhere in IT. So I was studying computer engineering at the time. I was getting ready to transfer to Cal State Long Beach. And I had the transfer paper in hand and everything. And I went on this fateful day, I went to a discernment retreat, totally by accident. And I quote that because the Lord, there's no accidents. There's always those incidences, God incidences. And so I was invited to this retreat as a chaperone because they needed some chaperones, and because I drove, so they needed an extra car so that I can get the kids there.
Somebody with a car.
Yeah, somebody with a car. We need them. And so I was like, okay, I volunteered because I'm so charitable, and I decided to go there. And I went there solely as just a chaperone, just keep an eye on the kids, make sure that they don't get in trouble. And to be honest, I was there. I was like, okay, this is nice, but it just felt like it wasn't for me, because they had all these panels of seminarians and women religious, which I was so just enamored by their story and just hearing, wow, these are really heroic type of stories. And this is for the Vietnamese community. So you had a lot of individuals who had immigrated here during the war and settled here. And so they're having these amazing heroic stories, which I kind of felt disconnected from. I was connected in the sense of being, Vietnamese and being from Vietnamese immigrant parents, but being second generation. So it was a little bit different of a experience, but it was great to hear these stories. But it wasn't what captured me. What captured me was a priest, a diocesan priest of this diocese, who was like myself, an American-born Vietnamese priest. And I just remember being so just struck by that. I was like, what? Because most of my experience has always been where Vietnamese priests were immigrant priests and refugees that came from Vietnam with these heroic stories. And then here I see this one priest with just a very, quote unquote, regular but beautiful story. And so I was immediately captured by that. And that was in my second year of college. So I was around 20 at the time. And then from that point on, I was just pulled in. And I think the two big points that he made that really drew me in to discover it even more. One was that the fulfillment of his life. And I remember going through my story, because we were in small groups. And so we were in the college age group. And I was going through my story, telling them about my life, and telling everybody, I should say, about my life. And then I was just kind of like, is this it? I felt like this void in a certain way. And then all of a sudden, this priest comes in and talks about fulfillment, doing the Lord's will, being a priest. And I was like, wow. But I think the biggest thing was the love of God the Father. When he starts speaking about just the love that he experienced by fulfilling this call, it was something that he just couldn't turn away from. And then that immediately captured me. And then from that moment, my faith started growing, the discernment started growing, the call to priesthood started growing. And it came with a little other discernment points that I had to go through. But in short, that was pretty much where it all inspired and transpired. And I had this amazing mystical experience with the Eucharist. And that was the point where I knew that the Lord was calling me to be a priest.
Is it sort of like a light bulb just sort of comes on, or is it more of a, hey, this journey that, I'm thinking about it, and then at some point it's like, yeah, this is it?
Yeah, I can't speak totally in generalities. I think one being from being in vocations and hearing so many of stories from both men who are discerning the priesthood and then women who are discerning to enter the convent. Every story is a little bit different. Sure. So at least in my experience of it, it was more of a little bit of a light bulb, that went off because I was kind of just going about my life, and I had my goals. And I'm a type of person, just like in sports, right? Like you have your goal that you're going to set, or the athlete that you want to be, and then you start, and I was always known to give 100% into it. So when that went off, I was just like, okay, I'm all in. And so, for me, it was much more of a light bulb, but for some others, it is gradual. Like some stories I've heard is, this was planted in me ever since I was a kid. And so I just always thought about it, but went through life. Or some just take a little bit of time, and some might not be at the beginning of their life, but it might be a little bit later, or sometimes in their careers. And then they're just starting to think about it. They move back and forth, between, maybe this is the call, maybe not. And some take 2, 3, 4 years. And actually, I have a friend of ours that was just ordained last week. And he had been discerning in and out for multiple years. It took him 14 years, to be a priest, and now he is. And it was one of those one finally moments, but at the same time, a very great gratitude that the Lord works with us in so many different ways. That some he from birth, and then some others is gradual. It's like the prophets we hear in the Old Testament, and for like Jeremiah, or for Abraham, and all these individuals that were light bulb moments, and some were gradual over time.
And the vocation is so unique, obviously, and demanding in a lot of ways, that I'm sure the idea is to make sure you have somebody who really is bought in at that point, right? Who really, whether it takes 6 months or it takes 6 years or 14 years, you're right. You know, and I'm sure that's part of your job as well, right? Is to make sure that, you have men that are, hey, I'm ready. Let's do this, right? They're chomping at the bit to get ordained.
Sure. And that I would say would be one of the challenging parts of the work that I do in the ministry is one, just being patient, but also meeting guys where they are, but also understanding what the Lord is calling them to do. Because I can cookie cut the process. I know my goals, I know what I want for them, but I know it's not me. It's the Lord, and it's the Lord's will. So that would be the challenge a lot of times, is spending a lot of time in prayer and discernment for these men. And this is what's been so fruitful, is my relationship, not only just with discerning with the men themselves, but my relationship with God, and also seeing their relationship with God kind of grow in that. So a lot of others, I kind of gauge it, and to be like, okay, if this man is on fire, if he definitely has that maturity, then we kind of push it a little bit more. Whereas from others, they might be a little bit more sensitive to it, or maybe on the fence. And with those individuals, that's where we kind of be okay, let's kind of slow play this, right? And it's kind of like reading a play. When you're, I know basketball is all about read and react, right? So it's okay, if they're on a run, let's slow it down, call a timeout, and let's just wait for this to play out. Or if you have the momentum and you're on the run, let's keep running, let's keep going. So I can use a lot of those analogies, into the discernment process for these men and women, and it has been a blessing for sure.
And in a world that seems to be getting more and more secular in so many different ways, there seems to be still more and more people that take this call, right? That are entering the religious life. It's so great to see that there are people who. We're seeing the numbers rise, I believe, right? And people that are joining the priesthood, and women that are joining the convents as well.
Yeah, I would say it's a gradual. I mean, we did have a period. I mean, I'll be real with it. Is over the course, if you say within the last 10 to 20 years, if you look at that, there's definitely been kind of a more steeper drop, of it. In the more recent years, it's kind of been a slow decline. I know in religious communities, it's definitely been a steep one as well. But you can definitely see, though, in the more recent years, there's a small gradual climb. I can speak for our diocese, too, that there is something that's there. And I think a lot of it, like you said, just seeing the world and the divisions and the way that it is, I think people desire something deeper, something more true, something beautiful in it. And we know that the Lord God himself, he is the source of all beauty.
Right.
And my whole theme of being a vocation director, I remember praying about it before taking the job itself and spending time in prayer and retreat, was the Lord was just saying, I want you to show how beautiful this vocation is, and not just priesthood, but any vocation, marriage, holy orders, being in a convent, being a priest, like there's a beauty in it. And so I know there's just so much more to do. And that's where the lament comes from, because now moving on to the parish, but they always say in vocation circles, once a vocation director, always a vocation director. So I think there's always going to be that sense of me always showing that beauty, of it. And I think that's really a role for all of us. And Pope St. John Paul II says in Pastoris Dabo Vobis, everybody's responsible for a vocation. All are responsible for a vocation. And that's been the beauty of it all.
Yeah. So you just led me into right where I was going,
Sure.
was that the bishop has said, hey, you're going back to a parish, right?
Yeah,
So I can see, I could just talking beforehand, your excitement in going back in, because, that's really where I guess, priests really, you started in a diocese, and it's getting that connection with the community. So, just let everybody know where you're headed and what.
It's a little surreal that, just a little over a month away.
Because you were doing this for 5 years, right? 5 years.
So back in 2019 was when I started, and then we hit like COVID. So I think that kind of blurred, the years a little bit, like for all of us.
For everybody, right?
Yeah. And so then up to now, it's been 5 years. And so, I'm heading back into a parish, Corpus Christi in Aliso Viejo, which is my old stomping ground. Well, at least the city is my old stomping grounds. I didn't grow up at the parish, which would be kind of interesting. I'll go back to all the basketball courts that I used to play on and all the different parks that we used to go to for practice. And so, so I'll be going back to that parish. And like you mentioned, there is an excitement about it. And it's also important to clarify, especially within the priesthood, there's two different tracks of it, where there's the diocesan priesthood, and then there's the religious life, which are communities like the Franciscans, Dominicans I was mentioning earlier. And with that, the priests that are in the parishes, most of them, like myself and a few others in our diocese, we chose diocesan life, which is the pledge and promise obedience to the bishop and whatever the needs are there, and which most of the time are his parishes. And so to be going back into that, and which is what we discern a lot of times when, before we enter the seminary, we start thinking about, are we called to diocesan life or religious? And when we enter the seminary, which is a good amount of time, it can be easily 7 to 10 years of formation. So it's a good chunk of opportunity to discern. Yet at the same time, there should be a surety of where you're going in that direction. And if you're going diocesan life, most of the time will be in the parishes, being with the people, shepherding souls. And so that just gives me so much excitement. And I think it helps the hit a little bit, more just knowing the fact that I'm going back into a parish. And I say it's bittersweet, right? So, I mean, just everything that I've been able to do the last 5 years with the discerners, seminarians, I'm definitely going to miss that. But at the same time, this is why I entered the seminary, is to be able to shepherd souls and be a spiritual father to a flock and to a parish. And I'm looking forward to it. Sure.
It's funny because you just, and maybe people don't understand maybe the difference between, I just, for the first time, I just visited the new Abbey out in Silverado Canyon, Albertines,
beautiful
out there. And that community, excuse me, that beautiful, new Abbey they have out there. But you're right, that's a different kind of priest than the kind of priest you are, even though a priest is a priest, right?
Sure,
but I guess maybe the way to do it is the job is different.
Yeah, the job's different, or even the promises or the vows. That's kind of how we make the differentiation. A lot of times the practical is the way that we live out our life. And so religious priests, they live more in the community. So you named one of them, those who are at St. Michael's Abbey are Norbertines, and which are amazing, great priests. I'm great friends with a few of them. And actually, when I entered this ministry as Vocations Director, I know they do such a great job in promoting vocations. So I immediately reached out to the Vocation Director there, because each religious community has their own. And Father Vianney Seja over there, him and I have a great friendship and a great connection to grow in vocation. So there's that in itself. So you see them living in community, where diocesan live more in a parish, kind of individually out on our own. And those are pretty much the differences. And then the more deeper aspects I mentioned about the promises and the vows, they're a little bit different. Where religious, they take the vow of, we call it the evangelical counsels of poverty, obedience, and chastity. Whereas for the diocesan priest, we make two promises to the superior of the diocese, which is the bishop of the diocese, and the loyalty to that diocese. And then secondly is the call to celibacy and everything that entails. Right. So you see a little bit of a nuance, there between the two, but very much the office of a priest, like celebrating the sacraments, confecting it. That's all the same. Once a priest, always a priest. And once you're ordained, those are the office and the faculties that you carry out.
And we hope that maybe somebody out there listening to this show today may get that call. Maybe the seed is planted.
Yeah.
How great would that be, right?
Yeah. I mean, it would be great. That's, I think, one reason why we're doing this too is just to also plant the seeds out there that it can happen anywhere, anytime. Right. I mean, it wasn't like I was looking for it per se, or maybe there was a deep inkling in our souls. And I think that's where kind of always being conscientious, because I think sometimes, again, being part in the secular world, we can just go through the motions and or set these kind of material goals and not thinking about how much it feeds our soul. So I think the moment that you really start to think about and foster that part, like the Lord wants to take care of our souls, and it's also upon us, to do the same. And so once you start thinking about that more interiorly, then holiness is really where it begins. And that's actually a lot of the conversations I'm having with discerners now at the beginning. Is not about figuring out whether you're called to be a priest or called to be married. Yeah. Really, the initial call is to know, love, and serve God and serve the Lord. And if you can start that's the road to holiness. And then priesthood, being in a convent, being married, that's just the means to the end of holiness, So that's something that's very valuable. And hope that whether it be on a basketball court or in the church or wherever it is, those seeds can be planted.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, back to basketball.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because we have
a big game. I could do this all day.
Right, and I love the conversation. But I want to get back to this game as well. Priest versus seminarians is right on the front of the trophy here. For those who can see it. Yep. There's 5 little plaques on the side. We have the winners every year. And I was looking at the scores here, and I go, that's pretty close. Every second year, it looks like I got a little out of hand. 50 to 33 there. But other than that, 77-44. Okay, but we've had some close games, which is good. Sure. Explain how the game kind of came about and how this all sort of, because you mentioned the 2000, I think it's 2015 was the first game, and of course there's 2 plaques missing, COVID. So many other things took those out, and we're getting back to it now. But how did this game get going?
Yeah, this is kind of a pride and joy of mine, and I don't want to take total credit for it. And it was actually back in 2015. Well, let me go back even more. So when I entered the seminary, I went to seminary up in the Bay Area in Menlo Park, and there at the Diocese of San Jose actually had a Revs versus Sems game. That's what they called it up there. And I played every single year from when I entered the seminary through when I got ordained. But I remember a couple of us from Orange, we got together. It was like, we need to bring this game down to Orange County. Like, how sports filled the county is, or how this love for sport is. Like, we need to bring it down there. And so it was myself and a few other seminarians that were kind of thinking about it. One seminarian, he's now a priest. He tried it. It just didn't work. And then it was myself and this other seminarian. We're like, hey, and I think the other seminary wasn't a basketball head, so all the intricacies behind that. Okay. So then myself and this other seminarians were total like basketball nerds, and so we were like, hey, we're going to make this happen. So and we're willing to do all the work. And so lo and behold, 2015, comes along. At that time, I was either ordained as a deacon or getting ready to be ordained as a deacon, because you have to be ordained a deacon before you become a priest. So myself and this other seminarian were like, let's do this. And so we had a whole business plan, and then came to the Vocations Director and says, hey, I know that we tried this, or at least the idea was pitched, but it kind of fell through. But I promise you, we'll make this work, And so myself and this other seminarian, we got to work and we were able to put it on. So back in 2015 was our very first game here in Orange County. And it was over at St. Jean de l'Estanac in Tustin over there. They have this beautiful gym. I think they seated about 600-700 people. And I know this is like 9 years later, but sisters, we apologize for packing that gym because they made it very clear that do not go over the capacity, but we couldn't control that. And it was great. It was a great problem to have because we packed the gym. I mean, the capacity was maybe 500-600.
Okay.
There were easily like 700 people there for our first game. And that was a really close game. I mean, it was a blast. And I was on the losing end of it. And again, don't ask me my record, of this game here, but over the years. But we knew from the get-go that this was going to be a great success. But it wasn't just about the numbers of people going, but just the camaraderie. People were gathered together. Again, evangelization.
Right.
And we've had people that would invite their friends who aren't Catholic, to come to it, and they have a blast. Yeah. And so we've been doing it over the course of the last few years, and it was super successful last year. And like you said, we did have those couple years of COVID where we weren't able to have the game. But yeah, last year we packed the gym. I think we had near 1,000 or maybe even over 1,000. So it's been such an awesome opportunity. And this year it's going to be on Friday, June 14th. Same schedule that we always have, where we have 5 p.m. where we have food trucks, social, where people can just congregate and talk and fellowship. And then with the doors open around 6:30 for people to come in. And then we tip off at 7 and play an amazing game. And last year we had a really, really close game. Yeah. And we actually started off with priests versus seminarians. But last year was a first time format for us where we did North County versus South County there. So we actually combined the teams together, priests and seminarians, but split them between wherever their home parishes were or wherever the priests were assigned. And at first it was a little bit, because, over the years, you're used to a certain way, of how it was, like how the game was. So people are so used to priests versus seminarians. So they were kind of like, I don't know if this works. But I mean, we had such an amazing time. Like, I think people also, it kind of evened the playing field in terms of fans base. So it's like, hey, I know that priest I'm going to root that, for that.
I live in this parish, I'm there.
Yeah. So it was really cool. And it came down to the last second, of basically a game winner. Too. So that was awesome.
Has it been easy to find athletes within both kind of groups to
it ebbs and flows. I'll be honest. And there's certain times and years where you just have like really solid, and it's also a challenging time of year because that's when our seminarians are on summer assignments and stuff. So trying to pull like all the seminarians can be a little bit difficult, and priests as well. They usually take their vacation, so we try to do a little bit early as possible, so we can get as many priests and seminarians who play. So that's kind of that's where that.
And I imagine with the old format, the chance to graduate from the seminarian side to the priest side was probably a big draw, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think a lot of. And there was a couple of years where we had a lot of athletes that were seminarians and that became priests. And that was when I became a priest. So I was super excited when they were going to be, because I think there was a couple of times where we got blown out, by the seminarians, the younger, the faster. Right. But when those younger guys, became priests, it was really helpful for us. And so it kind of turned the tide a little bit. But so there's kind of that cool ebb and flow of it that is not always just going to be kind of lopsided or one-sided. There's going to be kind of there's this team or that team, and now I think we've evened it out even more by doing the North and South County, which has been such a great draw.
Right, and how much fun is it for the athletes, the priests, and the seminarians?
Oh my gosh,
get out there and do this, right?
There's been priests who have been on me like all year. About like the moment the game ends, it's like, okay, hey, when's the next game? And they start training and stuff like that. I'm like, man, I haven't touched a basketball for months. So, but there's been some guys who like the athletes that are just all in on it, and I think it just brings out that competitive drive. But at the same time, again, going way back to what we were talking about at the beginning, just that love for the sport and how much it means to us. So it kind of brings out that love for it, and kind of like you're a kid again, sort of thing. But,
all right, let's remind everybody one more time when, where, and how they can.
So it'll be Friday, June 14th, over at Mater Dei High School. It's very central there. And we start off with food trucks and a social fellowship around 5. And then 6:30, we'll open the doors to the gym for everybody to file in. And we'll start tip off at 7. Tickets are on sale online on our website at rcbo.org/basketball. $10 for general admission, $5 for kids. And we also have we just have $10, for general admission, but then we have a bundle of $40 for 5. So it's a great time, and a lot of it is not just about fundraising. It's really just about that fellowship and just that camaraderie, and to promote vocations. So come on out.
Absolutely. Father, we appreciate the conversation. Thank you for coming in. It was a lot of fun. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck in the game. Good luck in your new assignment as well. Back to a parish. And we really appreciate the conversation. A lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bob. It's been great talking with you. God bless you.
You too.
All right.